Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I hope you can join me tonight for my live. I'm doing a series at the moment on various digestive, gastrointestinal symptoms, conditions, problems and disorders. And tonight and next week, I am focusing on the topic of leaky gut. Sounds a bit laughable, I know. Some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not. But it's something that I come across, or some of my clients seem to think they will have it. Sometimes I test for it and we may or may not find out that people have this. So I just wanted to give an explanation about, what does this actually mean? Why does it come about? What are the signs and symptoms to look out for and the common causes? And then next week in part 2, I'll talk about how you can test for it. It's not always 100% foolproof about it, but I'll talk about that next week. And then also talk about the ways in which we can either help to avoid getting this in the first place or to certainly help manage it. Of course, I never use the word cure, but we can certainly help manage things, help to address the problem. So leaky gut. So we all know about the gastrointestinal tract. I found out today when I was doing some research on this, it's 4,000 square feet of surface area, our gastrointestinal tract. It is huge. It's got a really important role as part of our breaking down of our food. But what we need to talk about today is the fact that it's really important as a barrier. I talk about the gut barrier, the health of this gut barrier. And this is where we come on to talk about leaky gut. So leaky gut, it's known, strictly speaking, as intestinal permeability. Now, when we talk about the gut, we know that we need to be able to digest our food, and we know we need to get the nutrients from our food from the gut and into the bloodstream. So there has to be a way for this food to pass through from the gut and into the bloodstream. And there are very, very small gaps, if you like, that enables the passage of nutrients from the gastrointestinal tract and into the bloodstream. So that's perfect when everything is just perfect. With leaky gut, what is actually happening is that there are larger gaps that are appearing between these epithelial cells. There are things that are known as tight junction proteins. So we think of leaky gut, and these tight junction proteins junctions become larger. You get these gaps, and therefore we talk about the gut barrier becoming leaky. The gaps get wider, and this enables for things to pass through into the bloodstream that shouldn't pass through. It enables pathogens to pass through. It enables toxins to pass through. It enables, some of the waste that shouldn't be getting through to get back into the bloodstream. It allows partially broken down food. Of course, we should only be able to get the really tiniest particles, the macro, micronutrients and the glucose and the fatty acids and the amino acids to get through into the bloodstream. But if the gaps get larger, it can enable partially broken down food to get into the bloodstream. And this can set off a chain reaction of food sensitivities and potentially allergies appearing. So these epithelial cells, they create these tight junctions. They're sort of overlapping cells, little gaps that enable food, fully digested food to get through. But these gaps can start to get this a little bit wider. And I'll go on to talk about the reasons why this may happen. So if the gaps get wider, as I said, these things can pass through. Now, some of the signs and symptoms that you may want to look out for, certainly for those that are in more chronic situation, there are links between the more serious inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and celiac disease to have links to intestinal permeability. But we know also that some of the IBS type symptoms like diarrhea, constipation or alternating between the two, and some bloating and abdominal pain can also have links with leaky gut. Now, it may well be that, what comes first, it's a bit like the chicken and egg situation, and it doesn't mean that if you have those symptoms that you do actually have leaky gut, but there could be an element of that going on at the same time. The other things beyond the gastrointestinal tract, because of course you're enabling things to pass from the gut into the bloodstream, it is now showing links to what I call systemic health conditions. Systemic means things that are in the bloodstream and happening anywhere in the body. So skin conditions, autoimmune conditions can have a link to intestinal permeability, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. I'm not saying here that it's the leaky gut intestinal permeability that's causing these conditions. I'm saying it's a link, and there's an element that is enabling potentially that these conditions to perpetuate in some individuals. I'm not saying it's the root cause of it, but it could be part and parcel of the problem. Autism and depression, something I'm not going to go into tonight, but intestinal permeability, leaky gut, there's a thing that is talked about, leaky gut, leaky brain, and some of the reasons for having leaky gut can be also a reason for permeability of the blood-brain barrier to occur as well. Psoriasis, dermatitis, these skin conditions, and other chronic inflammatory conditions, so other types of inflammation, but also with the autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune conditions. So why is it, why does this occur? Why is it that the gut barrier that should have these tight junctions, what happens that enables these tight junctions to become damaged and therefore allow them to become leaky? Well, first of all, we do have to start with diet. Our diets today are far too what I call pro-inflammatory, and the inflammatory foods that we may be eating can irritate the gut lining. So too many sugars, too many refined carbohydrates, which part and parcel really are just pure sugars. They're all quite inflammatory. Vegetable oils are inflammatory. Processed foods, chemicals. Again, I found a stat today that says that in a year we come into contact with 80,000 chemicals and different toxins. 80,000 chemicals. It's a huge amount. We swallow chemicals, of course, with our food. We may be breathing in chemicals as well, but it's a huge number of chemicals to come into contact with, and they're going to irritate the gut lining. Of course, they are safe, but if it's an overload that starts to cause the problem, so they damage the gut lining. Gluten. Now, we do know that gluten can be particularly problematic for susceptible individuals. And what I mean by that, I'm not just talking about those that have celiac disease that then flatten these important finger-like villi and make it really difficult then for people to absorb nutrients. It's just that some people with eating gluten can particularly damage the gut barrier, creating problems with these tight junctions. Now, I do think that most people are able to eat some gluten, but I think the problem with our modern lifestyles is that we eat far too much gluten in our diet, and modern wheat grains and carbohydrate grains like that. We just have so much of it in our diets today. We only have to look at a typical diet with cereal or toast and different breads, and you do have to include sourdough, even though it's the modern food to be eating, and it's so much healthier. Yeah, I do think it's a little bit healthier, but it's still wheat and it's still the grain, and it will still contain gluten. So, you've got that, you've got pasta, and then of course, if you're going to eat some biscuits or a bit of cake, we are surrounded a lot of the time with gluten in our diet. So if you want to have a look at that, you're going to start looking at how you can reduce your gluten intake. And dairy for some can also be a little bit problematic, because as adults, we don't have the enzymes to properly digest lactose, the milk sugar. And so lactose can be a bit problematic and cause symptoms in our body and may irritate and damage the gut lining. So that's to do with foods. Then we need to think about some of our medications. First of all, antibiotics. So antibiotics are going to start to create this problem and this picture of dysbiosis that I'm going to go on to talk about next. The use of pain relief medications, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen is going to be part of a problem as well. Again, too much use of these types of medications and other medications as well can potentially irritate and damage the gut lining. So it's not that, you may have some pain, you may need to use some pain relief, that's fine. It's the prolonged and long-term overuse of these that starts to cause the problem. And the next thing to think about is chronic stress. Yes, we're all living in very stressful times. And even before COVID, people had far too much stress in their lives. Our modern lifestyle is very, very stressful in how we live this sort of fast-paced life, our expectations we put on ourselves. And stress is also known to lead towards dysbiosis with the gut microbiome, and also to damage the gut barrier. So dysbiosis, what exactly do I mean by dysbiosis? It's something I will have talked about before. The microbiome, this home that we have to trillions of bacteria in our gut. Dysbiosis just simply means there is an imbalance that starts to be created between the beneficial, commensal, healthy and good bacteria that we want to see in abundance with the pathogenic ones. And I think of it like scales, and we want the balance to be heavily weighted towards these beneficial bacteria with not too many pathogenic type ones, bacteria and yeast. We'll always have some. It's not possible to have none at all. But the problem arises when the number of pathogenic ones starts to rise. It starts to tip the balance away from the beneficial ones. And the pathogenic ones are going to be feeding off things, are going to give off metabolites and toxins and gases that start to damage the gut lining. We know it damages the gut lining. And the gut lining, when it starts to get damaged, and this mucosal lining, because it's got a very, very healthy layer of mucus over the top of it, is where our beneficial bacteria like to live and thrive. And some of them feed off that mucus and they start to then feed each other in turn by some of the healthy metabolites they give off. So not only are these pathogenic bacteria damaging the gut lining, but when you've got a damaged gut lining, you're then destroying the environment for the beneficial bacteria to thrive and grow. So it becomes a really vicious cycle. How on earth do you start to correct it? It's not something I'm going to talk about today. It's something I'm going to talk about next week. So just to sort of recap, leaky gut means intestinal permeability. The 4,000 square feet surface area of the intestines in our gut that we want to keep healthy mucosal layer that should only allow fully digested food to go through into the bloodstream. It acts as this barrier. However, when it starts to get damaged, it enables gases, pathogens, toxins to pass into the bloodstream, and from there that can create a cascade of other problems in the body, whether it's skin conditions, maybe links to autoimmune conditions, and within the gut itself, this unhealthy environment can be part and parcel of an IBS type picture, and with also links to inflammatory bowel conditions as well. I'm not saying that this is the cause of all these things, but it is a factor along the way that we need to take into consideration when we're trying to keep ourselves in good health, whether it's good gut health, good digestive health, or just good overall health in the body. So next Tuesday, I will talk about how we can keep it healthy, how we can start to try and correct an imbalance if there is signs of leaky gut, and how I detect this in some of the testing that I do that can give signs of showing that there is this sort of leaky gut picture that is emerging. So join me next week. Something to say, I've mentioned before that I convert all these lives into videos that are on my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health. And they're also converted into podcasts on my website. But when I create these lives, I also create a blog, which is also uploaded onto my website. So there's lots of different ways that you can revisit some of the topics that I talk about each week if you can't always catch me live doing these at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night. But I do save these lives, so you are able to catch up later on in the evening or tomorrow if you're not able to see it live. And if you do enjoy these, please invite others to join my group, because the more people I can spread the word to about some of these topics and health topics, that's all good news in my eyes. So thank you for watching tonight, and hopefully I will see you next week when I will share with you the ways in which the nutritional and lifestyle approaches that I use with my clients to try and keep things healthy. Have a lovely week, enjoy the sunshine that we're now experiencing, and catch up with you next week. Bye.